The Good Morning America studio was already tense before the cameras turned on. Not chaotic, not loud, just tense in the way that happens when everyone in the room knows something might go wrong, and no one's sure who will pull the trigger. Mark Wahlberg was scheduled to appear on the show to discuss his latest action film and his expanding business empire, including his restaurant chain and production company ventures. It had been pitched as an upbeat conversation about entrepreneurship, family balance, and his evolution from rapper to movie star to business mogul. But that was just the version the public saw. Behind the scenes, there were emails, conditions, and warnings. Mark's team had been very specific about keeping the conversation focused on his current projects and avoiding rehashing his troubled past. Good Morning America's producers had agreed, or at least they said they had. But just minutes before they walked onto the set, one of the producers whispered something to Robin Roberts about addressing his controversial past and holding him accountable for his previous actions. And Robin's entire approach shifted. The atmosphere in the studio carried the familiar energy of morning television, mixed with an undercurrent of anticipation that suggested something more significant was brewing. The GMA set, usually warm and welcoming for celebrity interviews, felt different today, more like a tribunal where past sins would be prosecuted rather than a place for friendly conversation about current success. When Mark finally stepped onto the set, the applause from the studio audience was warm and enthusiastic. They knew they were seeing a genuine American success story, a kid from working-class Boston who had transformed himself from troubled teenager to rapper to movie star to successful entrepreneur. Mark wore a perfectly fitted navy suit that couldn't quite hide his still impressive physique, his demeanor confident, but carrying that distinctive Boston edge that had never left him despite decades in Hollywood. Robin Roberts provided what seemed like a standard introduction, though there was a slight tension in her voice. She said, "We're joined now by Mark Wahlberg. Mark, thanks for being with us this morning." Mark's smile was genuine, his Boston accent immediately evident. He said, "Thanks for having me, Robin. Always good to be here talking about the work we're doing." George Stephanopoulos jumped in with apparent enthusiasm. He said, "Mark, your new film is getting great reviews, and your business ventures keep expanding. You're living the American dream." Mark leaned forward with obvious pride. He said, "You know, George, I feel incredibly blessed. I've been given opportunities that a kid from Dorchester never should have had, and I try not to take any of it for granted." For about 10 minutes, the conversation flowed smoothly. Mark discussed his latest action film, his approach to choosing roles, and his philosophy about balancing entertainment with business ventures. The audience was clearly engaged, enjoying his down-to-earth personality and obvious passion for his work. Then Robin Roberts decided to shift gears completely. She said, "Mark, I have to ask about something that's been on many people's minds. Your past actions, particularly the hate crimes you committed as a teenager, have been in the news again recently. Some people question whether you've truly made amends for the harm you caused. How do you respond to that?" The question hit the studio like a cold slap. The comfortable atmosphere evaporated instantly. Mark's expression shifted from relaxed enthusiasm to controlled shock. He said carefully, "Robin, I thought we were here to discuss my current work. Those incidents happened over 30 years ago when I was a troubled kid. I've spent decades trying to make amends and prove that people can change." Robin pressed forward, her journalist instincts taking over. She said, "But the victims of those attacks have said they never received proper apologies from you. Don't you think you owe them more than just changing your life? Don't you think there's still accountability that needs to happen?" The other hosts looked visibly uncomfortable. This wasn't the promotional interview they had planned. Mark's jaw tightened, his Boston Street instincts warring with his media training. He said, "Robin, I've publicly acknowledged my mistakes countless times. I've worked with organizations fighting hate crimes. I've tried to use my platform to promote understanding and redemption." Robin's voice took on a more confrontational tone. She said, "But some activists say that's not enough. They say you've profited from a career that you might never have had if you'd been properly prosecuted for those crimes. How do you reconcile your success with the harm you caused? That's when something fundamental shifted in Mark's demeanor. The suggestion that his entire life's work was somehow illegitimate because of teenage mistakes struck at something deeper than media relations. He said slowly, "Reconcile my success? Robin, are you seriously suggesting that I don't deserve the life I've built because of things I did when I was 16 years old?" His voice began to carry the intensity that had made him compelling both as a rapper and as an actor. "I was a kid from a broken home, dealing with addiction, anger, and ignorance. I made terrible choices that hurt people, and I've regretted them every day since." The studio was getting quieter, the audience sensing that this had moved beyond normal morning television territory into something more personal and charged. Mark continued, his voice rising with controlled passion. "But you know what? I didn't just change, I dedicated my life to being better. I got sober. I found faith. I worked harder than anyone around me to prove that people can overcome their worst moments." Robin doubled down, clearly believing she was asking important questions. She said, "But don't you see how your success story might be painful for the people you hurt? Don't you think there's something troubling about the fact that you've made millions while they've lived with the trauma you caused?" Mark stood up suddenly, his full presence commanding the small studio space. The movement was controlled but charged with barely contained frustration. He said, "Painful? Robin, do you think I don't think about those people? Do you think I don't carry that guilt every single day? Do you think success erases the shame of knowing you hurt innocent people?" His voice filled the studio with raw emotion. "I've spent 30 years trying to make up for 16 years of stupidity. I've donated millions to charities. I've worked with at-risk youth. I've tried to be the kind of person who lifts others up instead of tearing them down." The audience was completely silent now, witnessing something unprecedented on morning television. Mark walked around the interview area, his movement controlled but charged with frustrated energy. "You want to talk about accountability? I've been accountable every day of my adult life. I've worked to earn redemption, not just expect it." Robin tried to justify her approach. She said, "Mark, I'm just reflecting concerns that many people have." "Concerns?" Mark's voice cracked like a whip. "Robin, whose concerns are you reflecting? The people who've watched me work for 3 decades to prove that people can change? Or the people who profit from keeping others trapped in their worst moments?" He faced the cameras directly, speaking to the audience at home rather than to the increasingly uncomfortable hosts. "You know what I've learned in 30 years of sobriety and success? I've learned that some people will never forgive you, no matter how much you change. Some people need you to stay broken so they can feel better about themselves." His voice carried the weight of decades of fighting for redemption and respect. "But I also learned that real redemption isn't about getting everyone's permission to move forward. It's about doing the work, making amends where possible, and proving through your actions that you're not the same person who caused harm." George tried to intervene. He said, "Mark, maybe we should." "No." Mark turned to face him, his voice carrying absolute authority. "I'm tired of maybe we should every time someone wants to drag me back to my worst moment. I'm tired of being told that 30 years of growth and contribution don't matter because of 30 minutes of teenage stupidity." He grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair, his movements decisive and final. "You know what, Robin? I came here to talk about my current work, my family, my businesses. Instead, you ambushed me with a moral interrogation about mistakes I've spent half my life trying to make up for." As he put on his jacket, he delivered his most powerful statement. "I'm not the same person who committed those crimes. I haven't been that person for longer than most of your viewers have been alive. But apparently, that doesn't matter to people who prefer perpetual punishment to actual redemption." The studio was dead silent as he walked toward the exit. You want to know what's really troubling? It's a culture that refuses to believe people can change, that treats redemption like a privilege instead of a possibility, that keeps dragging people back to their worst moments instead of celebrating their best ones. He stopped at the exit and turned back one final time. I'm proud of who I've become. I'm proud of the life I've built. I'm proud of the work I've done to make amends for my past. And I'm not going to let anyone make me ashamed of growth, change, and redemption. His voice carried across the studio with absolute conviction. To anyone watching who's made mistakes, who's trying to change, who's working to be better than they were, don't let people like this convince you that your past defines your future. Keep working, keep growing, keep proving that people can change. His final words rang out with quiet intensity. Because that's what America is supposed to be about: second chances, redemption, the belief that we can be better than our worst moments. If we lose that, we lose everything that makes us human. The studio erupted as Mark walked out with his head high, leaving Robin visibly shaken and the other hosts scrambling to recover. Within minutes, the footage was everywhere. Social media exploded with reactions that largely supported Mark's defense of redemption and second chances. Hashtag Redemption Matters began trending alongside hashtag Second Chances and hashtag People Can Change. The revolution wasn't just in a celebrity defending his transformation. It was in proving that true accountability includes allowing people to move beyond their worst moments. It was in showing that perpetual punishment isn't justice. It's cruelty disguised as righteousness. It was in demonstrating that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to let others define you by your failures instead of your growth. Mark Wahlberg didn't just storm out of Good Morning America that day. He walked away from a culture that preferred permanent condemnation to genuine redemption. He proved that change is possible, meaningful, and worthy of recognition. And he showed that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is defend not just your success, but your right to have grown beyond your failures. Because that day, Mark reminded everyone that America's greatest strength isn't perfection. It's the possibility of transformation, the belief that people can change, the faith that yesterday's mistakes don't have to define tomorrow's possibilities, and the understanding that true justice includes the chance for redemption.